Please take it away, Mick and Prime Minister, and wishing you a very interesting and captivating interaction.
Well, thank you so much, Frank, and really delighted to be moderating this conversation with the Beyond Bretton Woods initiative, which is a fantastic initiative, and really honored to be joined by a very, very special guest, Patrick Achi, the former Prime Minister of Côte d'Ivoire, to join us today. And Prime Minister Achi, I want to first begin so that the audience has an insight as to who you are. It was once said to me that what's more interesting about someone is not so much what they do, but it's why they do it and where they come from. And you've certainly risen to one of the highest offices in your country. And so I'm wondering, to kick us off, if you can share a little bit about your personal journey and what inspired you to pursue public service and leadership.
Thank you so much, Mick. Yes, very original story. I was born from a French mom and a dad from the Ivory Coast in France. And 6 months later, the divorce. So I found myself going back to Côte d'Ivoire, and my dad handed me over to my grandma, who just raised me. And I was this little, mud hut, with this violent, raining storm that, will get wet in the middle of the night, living without electricity, without water, clean water. It was late in the, early 50s, they're not independent yet. And I went through all that, got all the sickness that you can imagine, when you're before 5, all the way to 5, and I was able to make it through. Then I went to the capital city, to Abidjan, and, I grew up there. My dad dreaming, of me becoming an electrical engineer from one of the best schools in France. He was there studying, civil engineering himself. And across the street was this huge best school of engineering. Now, how do you make it coming from the little tiny village? He was on my neck, work every day, all the way through. So I was able to graduate. I got a bachelor from my own country, Côte d'Ivoire, in physics. And was able to get into this prestigious electrical engineering school. Unfortunately, it was already he passed already away. And then the very interesting story is that when I left at 6 months, I didn't see my mom anymore until 24 years after, when I was in France. And right after I graduated from electrical engineering school. So she saw me and wouldn't imagine that the guy she left 24 years back in the middle of the forest somewhere in Africa could be there in Paris having done that. So it was just a great experience. Then, my professional life, I just went to the State after that, to Stanford. I graduated there, and I could have stayed there, as you were saying, what made my story. But, the start of my life, this first 5 years, grounded me, all the way to my DNA, to things like, fighting, to improve the livelihood of people, not having electricity, I know what it is, not being able to afford clean water, I know what it is, being sick and, running around to find a plant or something like to cure you, I know, what it was there. So it was inside me. So even though a lot of people wanted me to stay, got a job, all that, it was so easy at that time, in the West Coast, but still I went back home. I was really proud of that. I started my journey within the political arena also, became minister, then, state minister, then Secretary General for the presidency, and then Prime Minister. So that's my story.
Wow, you mentioned 24 years, without seeing your mom, and it's crazy. Like my parents live on the other side of the world, and I'm lucky if I see them once a year, and that feels like a long time. But that's an incredible, inspiring journey. And I guess, I know you achieved a lot in your time in public service and as Prime Minister, but I'm just wondering, for our audience, and I should just say for our audience, we will come to a Q&A at the end, but feel free to put questions in the comments or reflections in the comments in the chat as we go. But Prime Minister, would you mind just commenting if there was one initiative or one breakthrough, just one that you're particularly very proud of during your time in public service?
I think that really, out of all these years, what I would be really proud of, me, but also the government, was able to bring water, clean water to people, a huge program of water and a huge program of access to electricity. The president was really concerned about that, and we went from less than 50% all the way today to more than 90% access to electricity, 70% access to water. And I think that this is an achievement you're always proud of, as I say, when you saw a country that was lacking all that.
And certainly, I mean, I know there's been so many strides. You talked about water access, but we had the opportunity last year for the organization I co-founded, Global Citizen, to be in Abidjan for the Economic Development Assembly, and it was incredible. Incredible food, incredible hospitality, incredible warmth. By the seafront there. It's really, you've got a sky rise like many in the world, in many of the big cities as well. So you see that, and you're attracting a lot of events. A lot of businesses are coming to Abidjan and Côte d'Ivoire. And I guess this brings me to the next question is, really the question of this webinar, what's next for Africa? And you, Prime Minister, you've been involved in reimagining with Mark Malloch Brown, with Ajay Banga. You've been involved reimagining what the next 80 years of global finance could look like to benefit people everywhere. And so when you think about Africa's future specifically, what's next for the continent?
I think that, I'm really looking and always trying to be better than what I've ever been before. And you said it, Ajay and Kristalina were fortunate enough, Sri Mulyani, Mark Malloch Brown, and myself, to be tasked on thinking about what this institution how should that reform to meet the expectation of 25 years to come, knowing that we have all these challenges, climate change, political fragmentation, AI, debt issue, demography, how all these challenges are going to bring the world 25 down the line, 2050, and is the institution fit for purpose to meet the expectation of that time is the question we've been asked and what we've been tasked for. We've been consulting around here and there, policymakers, so on and so forth, to be able to answer this question. But that brings me also on, the verge of this thinking process on an issue that struck me and for which, I've been talking with the World Bank and IMF, regularly. Yes, Africa has made tremendous move in the past 50 years. But when you look at how Southeast Asian countries have performed, then you realize that the continent is still lagging, compared to others. In 1990, 15% of the world poor were in Africa. In 2030, 70%, more than 70% of the world poor will be in Africa. Meaning that, there's a huge, effort to make to be able to bridge that gap. So you ask yourself the question, and I asked the World Bank, I asked the IMF, I say, you were in every single of these places at the same time. How did they make it? They made it so well. How were they be able to leapfrog? And still, here we are, still lagging behind. Most of them. Here and there, you have a couple of countries that are moving really fast yet, but globally, they are a matter of concern. When you look at the way demography is going, the continent is going to double its population in the next 25 years. You see the climate change issue, you see the food security issue, you see access of water issue, you see nutrition. I mean, all these issues, education and health, it needs so much resources that even this institution cannot match. And yet we need to move forward and we need to have answer. How do we scale up? But the question was, how did you did it? Because you were there and you were still at the same time in Africa. Why did it work there and didn't work in Africa? What do we need to do? What did we do wrong? And what should we fix? So this is the conversation which is ongoing. And myself, I work on that. I went to Vietnam, I went to Malaysia, I went to China, I went to Singapore, just to see and listen to people. How did they make it? And how could we make it better? And I think that, three key words come very regularly: leadership, vision, governance. These three things are very important in the process of achieving, much better from what we've been doing and heading forward on the challenges that we're going to meet. What might be the next steps?
So within that, you mentioned there was a lot there to unpack, but it was, I mean, deeply inspiring. One thing you mentioned is the fact you're doing this review with Mark Malek Brown. You've been tasked by the heads of the IMF and the World Bank. They've come to you as someone who is a doer, who's already done many of these things, and they've said, now look at the next 80 years. As part of that review that you're undertaking, I mean, there's many folks on the webinar today, who might have ideas, might be able to contribute. I mean, is there a way for people to get involved and contribute? And what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, Global Citizen give me, I mean, this webinar gave me a huge, opportunity to really move up the conversation with the webinars. What I think is that, no one can say that he has the full answer. Myself, having been infrastructure minister for, more than, 20 years, having been prime minister, I've been engaging with the World Bank and IMF all along. So I have my own experience and my own explanation. But from country to country, from region to region, for being a least income country, a developing country, an emerging country, you don't have the same answer. So yes, I would really love to hear from people, from their own experience. How did they live the experience, on engaging with this institution all along, the development journey? What went right? What went wrong? Why? How they see changes being made in the right way? Which direction? I'll be very interesting to hear from them. I mean, both teams will be very interested to hear from them because the time we're given is not that much. By mid, June, we should start to, give draft report. So I'll be very interested to listen, to hear from people.
So that's great. So there's still 4 months until June, but I know you got to write a report. So we'll definitely follow up with everyone with links, etc., on how they can contribute, how they can reach out and have their say. I want to come back though to what you were saying just previously about the opportunities ahead of the continent, and you were talking about how you leapfrog other ways of industrialization, other ways of development. You mentioned the challenge of creating jobs, and I think Ajay Banga himself said last year that I think the continent of Africa has to create 800 million new jobs over the next decade in order to keep up with Africa's rise in youth population. And when you look at industries like technology, like AI, some people can be bleak. They say, is this going to lead to less jobs? Is it going to lead to more jobs with the right skills? But one industry which, actually it was in Abidjan at this assembly, we had this incredible panel on the creative industries with musicians, with filmmakers. And one industry which people spoke about was really the untapped potential of Africa's creative industries, which currently generate, I mean, globally, I think more than 2.5% of global cultural revenue, if not higher. And, people are saying, well, there's so much more because young people drive culture. And so if you got the majority of young people on the continent, this is an area in terms of live events, music and film with the right investments, with the right policy shifts. And it's obviously an area that Global Citizen has a big interest in. We're taking John Legend to Lagos this weekend. We've got this music policy assembly. Hopefully one day we'll be bringing it to Abidjan. But I know that during your time as Prime Minister, this was an area you spoke about. And I'm just curious whether it's the creative industries or others, what are those industries you're particularly excited about that really could be a source of those jobs over the coming decade?
Naturally, I told you among the big challenges that we're going to face, demography. And I've experienced the fact that depending on the way and the lens through which you look at the world, you don't see the world moving the same way. Someone sitting in Washington, D.C., or even in China, where population is like aging, do not really feel the pressure of that youth being, something that we should really take care, about and think about. But Africa is that place. Anywhere you go, 60% of the population, 70% of the population in my country is age less than 35. So the youth issue is the biggest issue of any government. If you're not able to solve this issue, it will be a source of unrest, uncertainty, instability that no government at all by no means can really fix. So yes, job is the major issue, and AJ is fully right, and we are concerned about that. So that's why Global Citizen and all its agenda toward the youth is really at the heart core of what is our main concern, the youth. And the youth need to be trusted. The youth need to believe in themselves. Unfortunately, because of colonization, before so many things, sometimes quite a few people don't trust themselves, don't believe in themselves, yet they have so much talent, but they feel like maybe they cannot do it. Maybe they will not be able to do it. So you guys, when you come there with these big events, when you talk to them, they feel like, yes, I can make it. I can do something. I can move forward. So our mission will be now, how do you engage with them? Because unfortunately, sometimes also too much politics has been done, and instead of, giving them the right message, fighting for the right cause and the right ideal, they are stuck into this kind of things where they cannot take advantage of their full potential. And I would say a creative industry for me is definitely one of the biggest area. We have modernization of the agriculture. We have manufacturing, mainly value chain on the agriculture. Have agribusiness, have other potential. Tourism, another potential. But in creative industry is definitely the one for which the potential is huge and untapped. So this is something that to be done.
So just then, you were also talking about, both the optimistic side, you were also talking about some of the challenges and, the bleakness with which many people are looking at the world today. And, it's no surprise that we're living at a time when people do feel powerless. Many people say, can my actions make a difference? And, you're someone who's lived for a lot, you've seen a lot, you've risen to the highest office in the land. You're doing this review, but what would you say right now to those listening in this webinar, the role that we can play? Because you painted a positive vision there, and there's a role that we can all play, but can our actions make a difference? And how can we inspire hope and resilience at a time when it's much needed?
What I think you mentioned the word AI. I think AI has changed the world, the way we see it, the way we think about it, the way we engage, with each other in a way that makes everything possible. These kids out there in the continent, they don't feel like, I'm African, it means that they belong to the youth community of the world. They see themselves exactly like people who will be in the US, in Europe, in anywhere in the world. They just have their mobile phones. I mean, they just have their mobile phone on their hands. They are sitting in the remote village somewhere, and look at what's going on in DC. They look at what you guys are doing in New York. They look at your concert everywhere. So yes, wherever you are, you can change the map. You can change the journey of the people, fueling in them with, as I say, trust, dream, hopes. Their destiny should not only be just throwing themselves in the ocean, on a very dangerous adventure to go somewhere where they don't know if they are weighted, hoping that, that's where they will realize their dream. They should know that from where they are, they can make change that will impact the world, because they are just intelligent as anyone else in the world. They have talent than anyone else in the world. So, whatever you will do from wherever you will be, you can address them. And for me, we have to address them now with the right message, and anyone can give this right message, because sometimes people think that just African leaders can talk to this kid. No, sometimes they even is a distrust between these kids and their own politician or their government. So they are looking for role model. They are looking for anything, anywhere in the world, now that the world is open to them through internet. So they have to understand that the world, for instance, I see people talking about battle or ideas that are not ideas of today, you see. Now, our founding fathers have fought colonization to be free. The youth of this generation have to do the battle for development. So don't put them in the situation where they should feel with hatred, they should feel with revenge, they should feel looking back what happened to me 100 years or 50 years ago. You have to be pragmatic. This was a fight for their generation before. The generation to come has to fight the same fight that anyone in Beijing, in DC, Washington, in Los Angeles, in Paris is fighting, a youth of his age, using AI, using the power of their mind to change the world, to make their life better. And they can make it, and they can do it. And you guys, from Global Citizen, you are heard there. People watch you so much. Don't say, no, because I'm DC, because these people, no, because our job as leaders of these countries is to prepare the next generation to be able to meet the challenge of their time. We shouldn't be telling them, 50 years back that someone did us that. So it's your fight that you should go on with the fight, And that's why I like, Nelson Mandela. He was really an inspire for all of us. He got after 30 years old in the cell. He got out of there with no hatred, telling people, let's move on. It's with no time. If anyone, was supposed to make any battle against anyone, I'm the one. But I don't even have that in my mind, because I think about the next generation. I see far ahead, and the challenges are not there. Use your energy positively to build, to move forward, to help the humanity, because you can be a change maker. By 2050, Africa will be 1/4 of the whole population. All 1/3 of the workforce will come from here. How can we add up to the humanity, to the world, from our talent? This have to be positive, and I think they are ready for that. Give them this message, and tell them everything is possible. Look at what I was telling you. Could you imagine? And my mom was like watching me, someone, who went from that far and came, all the way, walking on the Golden Gate Bridge, watching the sea and telling himself, gee, I made it. I made it. It's possible. Wherever you come from, whatever obstacle you will find, change them into opportunity. And you guys can make it. So I think that with these kids, they just need to be considered. They just need to feel that we trust them, and then give them the tools to really change their life and change humanity. And it's possible.
Incredible answer. And actually, you answered several questions that I was going to ask you within that, including, leaders you admired, and you mentioned Nelson Mandela. Just a reminder to everyone, in about 5 minutes or so, I'm going to open this up for Q&A. I know someone's already asked a question, but you can type them in if you want to be first in line to ask the Prime Minister any questions. But Prime Minister, there were so many important insights. My takeaways from what you were just saying, like two really stood out. I think the first was around the power of community, right? And, it's often said that surrounding yourself with like-minded, optimistic people is one of the best ways to, instill a bias for action in each other, that we can make a difference. And right now, I just see a yearning for that community. And as you said, the good news is we have more tools at our disposal than any time in the history of humanity to really build that community that transcends borders, to find like-minded individuals, to mobilize with, and to find interesting ways to connect with and do good. My second takeaway, you mentioned pragmatism. And in my book, I talk about this concept of pragmatic idealism. And I think Nelson Mandela arguably was one of the greatest examples of that. And when I interviewed all these change makers, incredible people like yourself who have achieved extraordinary things, they all said, creating change, whether you liked it or not, involved working with people you didn't always like or agree with on everything, but it involved often creating unlikely alliances. And I'm conscious that people listening to this might be, hearing what you're just saying and saying, well, okay, Prime Minister, that's all well and good, but we do have these challenges. They might say US aid has just, been frozen, and that's 40% of the global humanitarian aid budget. They might point to the fact extreme weather events are already occurring, the outcomes of conflicts that we're seeing around the world. They might point to all of these issues that's happening in the world and say, that's pretty bleak. How do we make a difference? But it's often been said that to never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And so in your view, I guess, what's your response to that? And I guess, are there big opportunities right now that we might be overlooking amid the global uncertainty that could, as you say, leapfrog many of these challenges and problems we face?
Yes, thank you, Mick. I think now you're getting to a point that is really something that I've been thinking along and moving forward my own journey, which is it might be disruptive, it might be a little bit provocative, but sometimes we feel like this should be a wake-up call, because people are using the taxpayers' money somehow to help you. I'm talking about the cheap money from IDA, from other places, or USAID, but they might not do it. They might just end up saying, I'm going to take my own things. Because don't get used to the fact that the help is something that people owe you. People don't owe you something. You have to fight to get things. It's not been easy. I'm taking the Southeast Asian, I'm taking, these people have been graduating from developing countries to emerging countries. Like Vietnam. Vietnam is being bombed like no other country in the world has been bombed before. Look at what they went through. It's just in 1975 that they get out of that. It was 10 years that they wanted to do communist, whatever, collective. It didn't work. In 1985, they woke up and they say, okay, we stop all that. Let's be pragmatic. We have 100 million people to feed. They need to eat rice every single day. We can't produce that. They have to work. We can't find a work. Let's leave all this conception, all this ideology, and get on the ground to fix the problem that people have. They move forward. They were not there waiting for help. Now it doesn't want. They cannot give help anymore. Thanks God. Let's wake up, because this is time to wake up. Maybe now we will know that it was not given. It was not, we shouldn't take it for granted, because we look at the resources that we have, Mick. Look at all this arable land. Look at all this water. Look at this sun. How come this continent cannot feed itself? Yes, we need to say that. I'm not happy with what has been done, because the way it was done, beyond, the decision itself overnight, people didn't get prepared. This is not something you can do if you're human. But anyway, this is it. Life is like that. Nothing is always easy. You have to be prepared. We said, hope for the best, prepare for the worst is something that I'm keeping with myself, So Africa, let's prepare for the worst, even if we're hoping for the best.
I like that. And the point you made, embrace pragmatic idealism over ideology. We've got a bunch of comments and questions coming in. First of all, Eva, positive comment. She says, thanks, Prime Minister. We launched the Water for All project in Côte d'Ivoire, connecting 200 villages to water sources and providing access to water for over 1 million people. This achievement is truly thanks to you. You have been the best prime minister so far, with an exceptional talent for conveying complex messages to the population. So strong endorsement of your water initiative there. Eva also had a follow-up question. She said, there are so many opportunities in Côte d'Ivoire. I see many investors come in, but not enough making major investments in critical sectors like agro-processing, health, energy, and water. In your view, what is the main obstacle? Why aren't we attracting more committed investors to Côte d'Ivoire? I believe that by joining forces with Global Citizen, yep, we'd love to, we can make a real difference together. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that 2 days ago, the government launched a thinking process through how to work on the next 10 years plan, a strategic plan. And this issue came along, we were the first world producer of cocoa, the first world producer of cashew nut, the fourth world producer of rubber, but yet we are not yet moving up all the value chain. If I take the cocoa, for instance, the whole value chain of cocoa, from the farm to the store is $140 billion. Now the producer, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, there's many countries who are producing the cocoa, can make only less than 10% of the value chain. The whole rest of the value chain, job, revenue generation, so it's outside. So she's right. We need now, next step is move up the value chain of the raw material that you're producing so that you don't sell any more commodities. I agree with her. Now, Côte d'Ivoire specifically, since she's talking about Côte d'Ivoire, has been going through a lot. I was talking to you about my own experience, during my professional life. I went through a military coup in 1999. I went to a rebellion, a civil war that divided the country for many years in 2003. I went to a post-electoral crisis that ended up with 3,000 deaths in the city. And it's just during the 10 past years that we've been rebuilding the country, that we've been, again, having people talk to each other. The whole reconciliation process that the head of state was leading now is coming to a situation where the country is back on its feet. For 10 years, average growth rate of 6% has been made. Now we move to another agenda, which is what she's talking about, getting to the emerging country stage, which will require to keep on that growth, which will require also to invest in the private sector, because the private sector is the engine of the growth, is the one who creates the job. So no growth sustainable and inclusive could be done without the private sector. I can guarantee her that by next year, really, the focus will be, agribusiness, improving the modernization of agriculture, the agro industry, tourism industry, creative industry. I mean, really, the country now is ready to move the next stage, but we had business to fix before.
So great response. Minnie, who is a managing partner of Transat Management Company, a Boston-based asset manager, they have this question. African pension funds hold over $2 trillion in assets, yet their allocation to infrastructure remains below 5% compared to 20 to 30% in developed markets. What specific regulatory and structural barriers need to be addressed to enable African pension funds to increase their infrastructure investment, given that multi-development banks have struggled to mobilize private capital at scale? What concrete steps can the Bretton Woods institutions take to improve governance, risk management, and investment expertise within African pension funds to support more diversified asset allocation, particularly into productive infrastructure sectors?
Yeah, I mean, he's fully right. And I think that we're working on that with the Bretton Woods institution, which is that, borrowing money from outside, and getting indebted, as you move forward, investing in the infrastructure is not the way forward, because now if you are not able to create your own market, the national market, that you can really, through the savings, through the pension funds, and then use the resources to invest in the strategic sector to grow, you will not be able to make it. You will just go, indebted, and then you get the IMF to come and to get you out of that, and then you get indebted again, and then, this vicious circle, a lot of African countries have gone through that. And the only way to stop that is to really improve your savings, use the money of your pension fund, borrow from inside, and improve your credit allocation. Today, credit is around 20%, where in most of the countries who have been developed, in the East Asian we're talking about, it's 80 and in 100%, of GDP. So I think that, yes, once again, now is the time. Now is the time for Africa to learn from what has been done elsewhere, where this country have been able to leapfrog. Asia and the rest of the world who've been able to move forward were able to lead off the poverty in the 40 years that just passed, 1.2 billion people out of poverty. How did they did it? Exactly like he's saying. So now I think that, the new generation better trained, if they are in an environment where you have vision, you have leadership, and you have governance, will be able to make it. So we as a leader, we have two missions, First of all, we should set up an environment that is conducing to growth, meaning, create the proper environment, the right leadership, the right governance, the right rules and regulation, And second, we should tell our kids and the young generation that, the world they are moving is the world of the private sector, is the world of entrepreneurship, is the world of talent. And we owe them to train them, to educate them, to be able to take advantage of this huge opportunity to move the country and grow the country. We owe them to prepare them from the challenges that are to come. We will not be anymore in the next 25 years running the country and bringing the country to an emerging market, but that will be their role. But for them to achieve that, we need to prepare them so that they can take over from where we are to make the next move. We've done what we could do. It was not maybe as great as what might be, expecting, but our generation, the elite, somehow succeeded, somehow failed. The most important things for us today is let's not get in the mind of these kids the wrong ideas, the ideas of division, the idea of revenge, the ideas that does not move you forward. Tell them, look at there, the fight of tomorrow is not a war with arm, it's a war with mind, with talent. Let's prepare you for that war, which will be a positive war of tomorrow. Bring idea, innovation, creativity, whatever, DeepSeek, look at DeepSeek. Why wouldn't it happen to Africa tomorrow? It's possible. These young kids, bright one, there's such a lot of them, Mick, you cannot even imagine. They just want to be given the opportunity. So our generation should and will prepare these kids to be able to take over what we've done and move to a stage that they deserve to be. And the private sector is one, agro-industry is one. Don't worry, they'll make it.
So we're coming up towards the end. We got one or two questions left. Reminder, if you do have any questions, I'll try and put them in. Just type them in the chat. But Prime Minister, to Minnie's question, I remember going to Abidjan last year, and I was taken. One of our partners for the Economic Development Assembly was a Africa private equity fund. So they use Africa pension funds to invest in infrastructure. And one of the projects we went to was the bridge in Abidjan, which we did the tour of the bridge. And, they were telling us, the impact that did in cutting down travel time across the city from several hours to half an hour. and you could measure that in productivity rates, economic growth. It was extraordinary. But for this investor saying, look, this is an example of a project, and they were so proud of that and what had been achieved, and there's no shortage. And you mentioned before that Africa has something like 60% of the best places on the planet for solar panels, right? And I'm speaking to business leaders and investors who are saying, this is already profitable. There's a market here. We can scale this up and also hit Africa's energy needs with the right investment. So these are already opportunities for investors. And as you said, there's extraordinary young entrepreneurs waiting for this capital in order to build these projects. But I want to come to Frank's question, since he's our host and brought us here. He's asked, how can Africa claim its proper place within the global governance structure? So I guess beyond Africa, this is more about Africa to the world, I guess.
As you know, right, Africa has, as far as raw material, they have, all you need, to build the hardcore of the technology of the solar panel, so on and so forth. So they want to be part of the agenda of fighting, against, climate change and being able, to tackle the issue of reducing gas emission, of reducing the increase of temperature. And we all know that it's just about financial resources, and we're talking here and there. We're going from one COP to another COP to the next COP, pledging for this amount of money. And Africa is feeling like, are we talking about the same thing? We are not responsible for the emission. We do not account even for more than 4%. Now, the country who are in the forefront of doing that, can they raise money for all of us, the humanity, the planet, to be working on that? We know we have so many other challenges to meet. We have to meet with the SDG. We have to meet with all our development, our infrastructure. If we need to use additional resources for the climate change, it will be so difficult for us to meet that. So in 1944, as we were about, to launch this Bretton Woods institution, people realized, the whole world realized that, this was the moment. This was the moment for the world to gather around multilateralism, to gather around trade, to gather around a common monetary system and financial architecture, to be able to move that prosperous move of the world one step further down the line. Now, today, when we listen to the scientists and we listen to most of these people, most of them are convinced that if we do not put the appropriate amount of money where it should be, 10 to 20 years down the line, there is no doubt for them that some of the countries, on the most of the biggest and nicest place in the coast will be flooded, will be underwater. Some places will be completely drowned. So you do not feel the feeling that we had 80 years back. People around the table are saying, this is what the planet is at threat. Let's gather the money. We give this money to the developing world. We use that. We have an agenda and we move forward. So Africa is ready to play its part on the global fight against increase to tackle the issue of climate change. We are ready for that, but we need our partners to understand that we are no more in a situation when we're asking for resources. We're not in a situation of the North rich trying to give the money to the poor beggars. That's not it. We want them to understand what need today to enter into a partnership, because most of the issues, you take demography, it has an impact on migration, even in Europe. You take climate, it's all over the world. We survived COVID, pre-pandemic was all over. So most of the key issues are not African issues. They are interrelated. They are world issues. So when we ask you to help us today, it's to save all of us tomorrow from issues and threats that we might face all together. So I think that, yes, we are ready to play our part in the climate change. We need financial resources, not as bigger, but as part of the solution for the world. So may the one who have the resources, who see this threat coming, understand that now is the time to gather, to talk together, but not the time of division. The world facing one of the biggest threats he's ever seen since, we're here.
And I think one of the exciting opportunities for that is the first ever G20 taking place in South Africa this year. We've partnered with their presidency at Global Citizen on this initiative to scale up renewables across Africa. And there's so many, as you said, win-win reasons why that would be a good idea. Prime Minister, we're coming to the end, and I want to roll the next few questions into one last question for you before we wrap for the day. Morden has pointed out that your country has experienced such impressive growth during your leadership in a region, as you pointed, of enormous instability and development challenges. He's asked, what's your secret? But I would ask you, because I think you've commented on that. So I would ask you, based on everything you've learned and your secret sauce, so to speak, if you could reflect, if there's one thing Africa or even the global community should aim to achieve this year, just one thing, what would that be? And so that's the first question. And then the second question is there a book, podcast, or other resource that you really like that you want to leave the audience with as a point of reflection? So yeah, what one thing to achieve this year, and a recommended book or podcast or resource?
Yes, I was telling you for the first thing that for me, human capacity, improving everywhere, human capacity and sharing knowledge is really what it will help us move forward down the line. Africa is suffering, from brain drain, because the best brain, which are needed at a certain point to move some agenda, are moving, the other way. And we need, for me, to increase, resources education, to increase resources in talent development, to increase, the resources in brain sharing, because the issue that we'll have to face being in the Western world or in the African continent will regard the best brain, and we want our brain to stay home. So human capacity for me will be something I will see, because the human capacity, when it's there, it leads to leadership. It leads to vision. And at the end of the day, we have the resources. When we have the right people, just, like once again, like Nelson Mandela said it, it's impossible until we do it. And I think that every single thing that we might think is not possible, we are able to do it if we are, our gifted people, are there, for us. The second thing about the podcast, once again, AI is like moving so fast. So I was going through the postcards of Yuri Hariri. I don't know if you know him, and he brought up something. It's a podcast on his book, Sapiens. If you go, he's talking about AI in a way that myself I didn't think before, because sometimes we frightened because we're seeing this robot with an intelligent mind, almost thinking like a human being that will come after us, that will destroy the planet, that will take over. And I say, that's not possible. How can you see a robot behaving like a human being? And then he goes much deeper and tells you, no, it's not the robot that is going to have a human mind. But today, through the internet, through all these systems that we have, the machine and the AI is able to brainwash the mind of people to make them do whatever they want. So if anything wrong has to, be done somewhere, somehow, it's because people are using more and more this AI. It's even unconscious, and the machine are able to do things that you cannot even think about. Kids are there 4 hours per day. They are watching things you don't even know, and they are transforming themselves. They are putting in their mind things that you don't even know, and they trust the machine. They trust whatever they're doing. This machine learn to know us better than ourselves, and it can turn us into anything. So regulating a little bit AI is some of my concern, but I think that, it has positive issue, negative, but this guy, I really like him. He's very profound, deep in his analysis. I wanted to share that with you.
Well, Prime Minister, we really appreciate it. The audience has stayed on the whole time because I think they've been riveted by all the pearls of wisdom you have to share. I really hope people take up the opportunity to participate in the initiative you're working on to look at the next 80 years of the Bretton Woods institutions. I really want to thank you for your time. I hope this is the start of a big partnership, and I want to thank everyone for joining us beyond Bretton Woods, but really, really want to thank you. And thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, thank you. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you both for this captivating, conversation. And I have 3 takeaways from our conversation today in order to put some limelight on our BBW Paradigm Shift series. The first one is, thank you for speaking to some taboos. You mentioned the military coup in 1999. Not many people will actually reference it, or also make this comparison, which is challenging for Africa towards some successful stories in Asia. Also, I think I take away, your call to youth to actually take on the positive challenge and not look back into revenge or to into violence, but take this opportunity for education and entrepreneurship and coming up with new ideas to take on the challenge with the rest of the world. And thirdly, also very much so you call not for aid, but for partnership. And so this is another very important kind of principle and feature that we should endorse when we're looking at the multi-governance kind of structures and the challenges that we faced. So with that, we will try and also, along with Global Citizen, but also with your help, Prime Minister, try and also to channel and garner the ideas of the youth. And I think we would focus, especially on, African youth. What are their ideas? What are their frustration points? And how can we channel that in something positive? What are their educational needs? What are the opportunities for training, vocational training? And take it on as a positive spin. So happy here, collaboration with Global Citizen, but also with work and Mark Malloch-Brown and his team to make something positive out of this in the final report or in your preliminary report that you're about to submit in June of this year. So with that, again, thank you so much. Full gratitude for your time, your dedication, and your track record, and Mick for making this a very entertaining kind of interaction. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Mick.
Thank you.